welcome back to Nanowrimo channel. I'm Jacob J. Books Corner. Normally we're in a book corner, but today we're in front of my computer because you guessed it, it's another writing video, which means we actually are skipping character development and we're going directly into outlining. If you just want to see the outlining, I highly recommend going to this timestamp. However, I would listen to the first few minutes of this rant, or few minutes of this discussion, and then you can jump to the outlining stage. Essentially, this is going to take you to us outlining the book, not explaining what an outline is and different ways you can outline it, so I'm going to go through some of those as well. But I want to talk about why we're skipping characters, what that means for my head, what it could mean for yours, and that you're not, like, if this is something that happens for you. I'm also explaining to you how the rest of the series is going to work as well as we are building up to publication. I say we are pretty far off, at least 70,000 words off publication. That being said, we'll start there to keep it quick and easy for you guys in case you guys do want to jump right ahead along, which I completely understand. Essentially, going forward, we are going to be working in Act 1 entirely. The first draft, all you're seeing is me writing Act 1, editing, beta, feedback, line, edits, the whole 9 yards. I probably won't show you formatting. I think I'll leave that maybe to be a surprise. I don't know. Everything will be shown through Act 1. Now, if we're going to the fourth draft, which is typically my final draft, longer books, maybe 5, but 4 to 5 drafts. If we're towards the end and there still hasn't been a ton of change from draft 1 to draft 5, I might take a scene from later on in the book and show you like direct examples so you have a clear understanding depending on the situation. But outside of that, it's only those. For writing, as I was curious to see how I was going to do this, I decided that we're going to be doing it the way that we're doing it right now, where I'm going to write here on my computer and we're going to live stream me writing the first act, and then those live streams, once they're done, the live stream is done, I will unlist it. I still keep it in case I do want to do something with it later, the footage, I don't know. I will unlist it and we'll continue to do this for as long as it takes. We'll continue doing live streams for as long as it takes for the story until Act 1 is complete. Once Act 1 is complete and we hit the stopping point for there, which we'll have an answer today on what that means, I will continue to write the rest of the book on my own while also making a vlog, which will eventually will go up once the first draft is done. And then I will vlog experiencing editing draft 2. And what that looks like, I will probably do a reread vlog and then do a draft 2 vlog. I don't know. We might live stream the first few processes and jump into a vlog. I'm not entirely sure past that point, but I at least know draft 1, this is the setup for you, is that we'll live stream the entire Act 1 and you guys can write along with me or just watch me write, whatever, float your boat, I don't care. The rest is history. Also, today, when we're going through this, we are only doing Act 1 of outlining. You will not see me outline the rest of the novel either, as I don't want to. The whole point of this is to keep some ambiguity, so when the novel does come out, you are super duper excited to see the story as it is, but there's also going to be a lot of surprises and stuff that could catch you off guard that will keep you true to the story, but also like to make it more interesting for you as a reader. And this might be a controversial choice, I don't know. I personally haven't watched a lot of people do videos like this, so do let me know if you like this idea or if you think it's horrible. Let me know in the comments down below. I will try my best. It does limit your intake. However, this is the final video that I will, unless someone has an idea from an earlier video or something, will limit your intake. That being said, let's quickly talk about why I'm not doing a character video, and then we'll talk about different outline methods, and then we'll jump into the actual outline of it all. Essentially, when I was putting out this book, the plot came to me first. So normally with my novels, it comes to me in 2 different ways. I either have the characters first and then the plot second, and normally those are character-driven novels and not plot-driven novels, or I have the plot first and then character second, and normally those are plot-driven novels and not character-driven novels. If I get them both at the same time, then it's a beautiful meld, but normally it's one or the other, and I think it's only happened to me like once or twice where I've gotten both at the same time. For instance, GSR had 0 character development going into it. I just knew plot stuff. Whereas Tommy's book and or that series, which will eventually come out for you guys, which is a romance companion series, I had all character stuff first and 0 plot stuff. Project Sarah, which once again will eventually come out for you guys, I had all plot stuff, all character stuff, and 0 plot stuff. So it's just how my brain works. So at this very moment in time, I have 0 character stuff to go over with you. Now, moving on downwards, the only thing I really need to know about the character that I didn't know before was something that I learned on May 21st. I have a whole clip, but I'm just going to read you through the notes, and then if I have any more explanations in that clip, I will add it. The plan is childhood friends to lovers. That was a big thing. When you do friends to lovers, you can meet, you can have 2 friends that meet randomly, and then they slowly become friends, and they slowly fall in love based on that friendship. I find in certain situations that becomes a little less realistic because there's not enough time in a novel to really show 2 people becoming best friends and then falling in love. I find that, once again, it takes like a few books. I have decided we're doing it in a somewhat fast way. However, childhood friends to lovers is much more appealing to me, where they've known each other since childhood and they build up to, to the relationship part of the novel. Their parents are friends in this little village. I don't know much information outside of that. At around 11, one of the love interest parents gets informed of an opportunity. I've already decided that it's going to be some type of government official opportunity. They leave in the middle of the night, and they don't say goodbye. They don't do anything under those lines. They just leave in the middle of the night. And the main character feels like he lost a part of himself, this friend, these growing feelings of a relationship that are slightly brewing at such a young age that you're trying to figure it out. When Megan years later, he doesn't fully recognize him. However, the distinct green color, as I was picturing, So when picturing the love interest, this is what I'm picturing. You're not familiar with this character. This character is from Marvel. His name is Hawkeye, and I have several images for you to see. This is what I'm picturing when picturing the main love interest. Okay? That was what, the entire time I've been thinking of this novel, this is what I've been thinking of. So this is what we're thinking of. So he has very distinct characteristics. Okay? I also do believe I'm going to give him wings. Hulkling does not have a tail. I do not plan on this character having a tail at this very moment in time, but I do like the idea of wings. The only other thing I have as well is this other side character that I pictured this particular character from Dragon Age Vilgard. Not her actions, not the way she talks, not anything else about her, just the look of her. She's a dwarf magic user, and I find that to be fascinating, and so I do think that we might have some type of something going on with that as well. I'm not entirely sure. I think she might be the person who's helping in his shop, and or like another best friend that grew up with him, or a relatively new person to the village, or something along those lines. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that eventually she would be an integral character, whoever she is. Now, with that out of the way, okay, we can come back to this, because it's very important. The distinct green color, which is why I think it's really important. Let me show you what I was picturing. He comes in, borrows an item, requests telling a return. He does return, begins to help in this relationship with lovers. This is the rest of the novel, so I did black it out for the purpose of only focusing on Act 1. In this process, I did learn the main character's big festering loon towards love is abandonment. And I really need to personify this in a lot of different ways, but we're also going to personify this with this relationship. Due to the fact of being friends to lovers, and because that, I think, becomes way more complicated in a lot of different ways, I think abandonment works really, really well, because there's nothing worse than, like, your boyfriend abandoning you. But if that is the person that you count on the most, that is your best friend in the entire world, also abandoning you, it's going to be a very big reason why you might learn to not trust people so easily. And it starts, you can see the web of this main character start to, like, go haywire. I live for shit like that, so no complaints here in that regard. So that's the first thing. Today, I allowed myself to get a little lost in this story, so when I come down to sit down with you guys, I would have a better idea on the outlining process, and we'll talk about this, which will turn this into a bigger outline. And so let's go ahead and talk about outlining. What is outlining? What does that mean? I'm sure you've seen many videos, and so I'm going to keep this short and sweet. And I also have a few different ways that you can outline if this way doesn't personally work for you. Outlining is simply a way to break your story up into many different sections to make it easier for you to write. You have as much information as possible. If you're going into this completely blind, you're more likely to run into writer's block, which simply just means if you're going through writer's block, I don't really think writer's block exists. Some people do. I'm on the side that I don't personally think it does. However, I do understand the feeling of it. I do know the feeling of it. Sometimes you need to take a minute, step away from your story, come back, reread what you wrote, and figure out if it's the right direction. I always say it's probably within the last 5,000 words that you messed up somewhere. And it could have been those last 5,000, which is devastating to hear that you might have to delete a huge section. Or maybe you just jumped too far ahead. I don't know. I've written scene 3 of a new chapter first, and then realized that there were 2 scenes missing. It's all been done before. I just watched a video where the person who wrote Dangerous Assassin, I can't think of her name off the top of my head because I'm tired, wrote an entire, like, the 4th book instead of the 3rd book. So now she has to draft the 3rd book because she didn't realize she was drafting the 4th. It happens to everybody, I promise you. And that simply can happen for a lot of different reasons. However, it's less likely to happen if you go in with a distinctive plan. Okay? Different ways to make distinctive plans. If you are someone who really wants to be an exploratory writer but have a plan, I have a few ideas for you. The simplest answer here is to do the first method listed, which is the 5-chapter method, depending on how many chapters are in your book, which is simply you write in your little notebook or your little notepad or your Word document, whatever, chapter 1 through 5, and then you write at the end of chapter 5, the big thing happens. Whatever that is. I don't care. They kiss. In this case, in my example, the prince dies. Who? I don't know. Is Prince a name? I don't know. but the prince dies, okay? That is the big thing at the end of these first 5 chapters. And then, essentially, after you know what happens at the end of chapter 5, you write chapter 1 through 5 without any context. You can do whatever you want in those first 5 chapters, and you just know that by the end of chapter 5, this has to happen. So you're writing to that point, whatever that might be and however long that might take. And then you do the next one, 6 through 10, and I put it as all a dream because I really didn't fucking know. It's just a basis. I read a whole novel like this called Elizabeth Snow. I talked about her a few times. She's like one of my favorite characters. I don't ever know if that book will ever see the light of day. That's how I wrote the majority of that novel, was this way. And I find it to be really fun, and I think it's very helpful, especially for someone who is more like a plantser in the middle. This is a very nice soft spot for me. The next one is, I highly recommend always knowing the beginning, middle, and end of your story, and so you could just simply write that out. Now, I recommend more information than this, but you do you, sweetie. So for this one, beginning, MC meets love interest. Middle, MC falls in love with love interest. And love interest is a bad guy, and they make it work. That is super vague. You got nothing, and you have somewhat of a resemblance of a romance plot. But it's basically nothing. So I recommend a little bit of a paragraph for every section, just so you have a better idea. The next one is something that we kind of already did. So if this was an example that I was going to show you, I think it's really helpful, but we'll come back to it. We'll talk about this one first, and then we'll talk about brainstorming. I feel like these examples, these two things are basically coinciding in one way or the other. Essentially, the prince will die at some point is the example that I'm using, and essentially you would ask how, when, where, and why. And then after answering those questions, you would ask them again towards the answers that you've given. By that point, you should have a pretty clear idea of the plot and possibly some characters as well, and maybe a point of interest that stuck out to you. Once you do have the point of interest that sticks out to you for the story that you're trying to write, you would constantly ask questions upon that character as well. Why, when, where, and the whole thing. You would continue doing that over and over again until you feel pleasantly satisfied with the information you have, and you feel like you can jump into bigger outline where it's breaking them down by chapter or the novel itself. The other way you can do this is the way that we originally did it, which was the brainstorming / potting, which was the second episode of the series, which we did on a whiteboard. Was this where I just came up with the idea and I broke the idea up into smaller sections based on the 2 characters and kind of what would happen throughout the novel. And I could simply, like I said in that video, jump right into it. I knew a lot of different things. I knew goals. I knew the whole 9 yards. So that's another way to outline. Then if you're writing a romance, I recommend romancing the beat. It breaks down the beats of a lot of different romance novels and makes it very clear and very evident why these beats work. And if you're someone who struggles a lot with structure, I recommend following a beat sheet for that particular reason, because I do find it to be very helpful. I personally don't find structure very complicated. I find that when I start plotting out a novel on my own, the story tends to fall into the place of a normal story structure or a vastly normal story structure. I like to play with it just because that's who I am as a person. So that's one way to do it. Several beat sheets out there. We have Save the Cat and also Romance the Beat. I'm sure there's other genres. I think there's a mystery one out there as well you can get where it breaks it down even further. I can't remember if that's a Save the Cat writer or something different. Then the last thing you can do is I use GSR as an example here. GSR is a book series that I'm currently writing the 3rd book in. The first book is on draft 6 or something. The second book's on draft 3. The 3rd book, like I said, is on draft 1. GSR will become more prevalent throughout the channel as the year progresses, but I use it as an example. At one point in GSR book 1 was 15 chapters. It could still be, it could not be. I'm not going to tell you. I find some reason that to be somewhat of a spoiler. And when breaking that down, when you do 15 divided by 3, which normally there's a 3-act structure because you're doing 3 different parts, it breaks it down evenly to a 5-chapter set. Now, in my personal opinion, because the middle is normally a bit longer, I would actually probably want this to be 16 chapters and be 5 chapters at the beginning, 6 chapters in the middle, 6 to 7, then 5 chapters at the end. But that's just my brain. You do it however you want. I've done it very evenly before while writing. 10 chapters a piece per part. It works out just fine. The structure here does not matter. I know that a big moment at the end of every 5th chapter. because that's the big change point. And so I know at that point, we need another switch up so the story can continue to progress and you can continue to be invested as the story progresses. And I also know, because this is very important for my brain to know, that is the book was because novella. The series is a novella series. It's supposedly going to be 30K, and that equals out to be about 2K per chapter, which means that the goal here is that when breaking this down, I need to make sure that there's enough information that could warrant 2,000 words, because I am trying to think that ahead as well. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then you would break this down, so you have all this, which is super nice and super handy, and you would break them down even in more, if you want, to a chapter 1, and then you break those down into scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. The big chapter 1 is a summary of the entire chapter, which some people just use and move on with life. Very cool. Depends on the book for me personally. And then I would break that summary down into individual scenes. And then I would take those individual scenes and I would write them out. And the individual scene line normally is a single sentence for me. So once again, I can have a lot of ground, but I know exactly kind of what the goal is. And that's essentially what the whole point of this chapter outline is that you have a summary for a goal, then that goal is broken down into achievable slices. Because a 2,000 word chapter might sound very scary. A 750 word scene sounds a lot more appealing for a lot of people. You know, if there's 3 scenes, that's roughly about how many words you need. And you can break that down knowing, okay, if the prince is supposed to die, I could probably do that in 750 words. And that, my friend, is chapter outlining, okay? Once again, I did not cover beat sheets or anything of those lines, as I personally don't use them, so I'm not a great person to come to. However, we will be using Cattastic way of writing to break this book down, and we will be only talking about Act 1. Cattastic uses a 3-act, 9-block structure with 27 chapters in the end, equaling about to be 65 to 70k overall, which we'll talk about in a minute. Introduction, inciting incident, fallout, which is the first block. Reaction, rebel, reaction/rebel. Action and consequence is the second block. Pressure, plot twist, and push. Essentially what you have here is this is a great one. You have a reaction to something, then you have an action to it based on that reaction, and then you have a consequence to your action that you took based on your reaction. And that happens over the course of 9 different times, and they all mean different things. So new world, fun and games, old juxtaposition might sound very odd to you, but I promise you it's very important. Build up, midpoint, reversal also might sound very odd, but it's explained much better in the Cattastic video, which is going to be linked either in the cards or down below, so you can have a full explanation of it all. However, we are just focusing on these first 9 chapters. Now that we're here and everybody's present with me for chapter outlining and everybody understands, I did learn a few information tonight. I allowed my brain to brainstorm on one of my walks. I just worked to 16, and I have, alright, the first few chapters is them aging up from babies to 10, or 11 in this case, but 10 or 11 is fine, where they become best of friends and have a bit of a spark. Then he leaves at the end of that chapter, which I'm thinking is chapter 2, which we'll get into. The next 2 chapters of what MC's life is like 17 years later. Then he shows up at the end, and he leaves again on his own. The next chapter is him trying to find out information for him to show back up. Then he shows back up, and we follow the same case of where he comes to Barrow's Island. Up here, it's a bit more Pacific, is early book where he picks out an item for the quest. He's currently broke or not have enough for it. They make a deal where he'll come back for help on his off time. He shows back up, so we're breaking that down, and this is what we have. So we're taking this bit of brainstorming, and we're going to divide this bit of brainstorming, honestly, probably up to like 5 chapters. Then we'll go from there. That's the current plan. Also, I might push myself a bit more to really get this done. I normally would just allow myself to outline what I want to outline and then come back and work on it a little bit more and let my brain have a bit of a rest from it. However, I don't think that will be the case in this case. The first 3 blocks, which is the first act, is the first 9 chapters. So we're going to break these first 9 chapters down into more understanding of what this stuff is up here. I have a different book over here that you guys can see, which is for GSR, and I just took my normal outlining method, which is chapter 1, and then I broke them down into their individual scenes. Once again, I don't know if we're going to be doing a scene by scene outline in this case. However, we will be doing a chapter 1 outline, and I broke this up into the first act and the first block. Okay, so we're going to do, this is block 1. Chapter 1, we already know, this is them being born and aging up and stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and write down something and then I'll come back. Okay. So I quickly wrote out the main characters born into this world. We see age as kids, true moments are important, birthdays, learning about the world, school bullying, and more. These characters become really close. I think the first chapter will end around their 5th to 6th birthday, somewhere around there. And then we would break that down into even more individual scenes. However, once again, at this very moment in time, I am not planning on breaking them down even further. I think we're just going to keep them at a pretty surface level summary for this initial outline, but I might come back through at a later date and add more information. I won't probably update you on that, but I will tell you about it in the first live. Let's go ahead and do chapter 2, which we know that this is going to end around 10 or 11 and that he's going to leave at the end of this chapter. I'll see what I come up with and I'll come back. As you guys can see here, chapter 2, this follows the next 5 or 6 years as they become closer. It's a lot of slow moments. And I'm thinking walking in meadows and doing really random cutie cozy shit. We are dealing with family stuff here, but they are on their own a lot. I do believe they'll share a first kiss and then like a very cute little peck. Nothing, you know, because they're just children. But I do think most kids, like if you're thinking, like I had my first kiss in preschool, but like a first like actual kiss that happened to like 3rd or 4th grade, which is more around the age of like 10 to 11. And then L1 is whoosh away from the MC, starting their abandonment issues. Also, it will add a nice conflict when the love interest does eventually show back up, which is what we're going to talk about right now. So we come up here and I'm going to go ahead and cross out the things that we did accomplish. We also know that this hasn't happened yet where we started originally outlining, so nothing crossed out there. Next 2 chapters with the MC life at 17's there, and then he shows up at the end of that second chapter is the plan, which is the chapter 5. When I get here, I can explain this. I also come down to the realization, as this book is a bit weird, it's a bit out there, it's a bit different. The introduction's very true. We get introduced to the 2 main characters really nicely with this, you know, with them building and following over the course of many years. I think it's going to work out really nicely. And the inciting incident is the fact that he ends up leaving after a very touching moment that is shared without any conversation. And the fallout of that is the fact that we're about to jump 17 years in the future. And now he's a completely different character and he's a completely different person living a completely different life. And I do think he might feel a bit more on the cynical side and those type of things because of the actions. And then we'll talk about how reaction, rebellion, action, and consequence will play into the later half. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and write out what I believe what would happen with chapter 3. This is where getting to get a little complicated, but I'm going to try to figure it out. We're going to try to stick to cozy though. Basically, this is one of those perfect chapters where the summary for the chapter doesn't necessarily mean that's everything that's going to happen in this chapter. There could be more. I don't know yet. So 17 years later, we join the MC as he is alone in this village. So we can assume based on that sentence that his family no longer either lives here or they have passed, or something along those lines. His shop is about to open and we see him pick up a new item for it. We also see how the village has changed, what his home life looks like, and the new worker will be introduced as here as well. That is that character I showed if you watched that portion of the video. We also see him pick berries and work on potions of sort, introducing some of the ideas. However, that is very open-ended in my opinion, but that's essentially what happens. And that, my friends, is what I would like to call block 1 is complete. We're building block 2, starting with chapter 4. The blocks are simply, it's a structure thing. People find breaking a big section like Act 1 down into smaller sections. Once again, it's also easier for you to digest and easier to write. Essentially, the first 9 chapters is what we're writing together. That's all you need to know. Well, actually, you need to know a few more information as we figure this out together. Chapter 4 is reaction / rebel. Obviously, this is not really what happens here. Maybe... Oh, no, I guess, you know what? I guess the way that this is going to work out probably does make sense. Chapter 4 is more of his normal day-to-day life. I actually think... I'm not going to add this here. I don't think there's going to be any sign of him until chapter 4. So, let me think about it for a second, brainstorm it a bit, then we will work through chapter 4, and I'll come back to you. I normally talk to you after I finish writing a chapter. However, I just learned that up here will actually not be introduced. The new worker will not be introduced here because the new worker is actually going to be a bodyguard because what we learned here, so this whole thing, we learn what the MC does. This chapter ends with him in his shop already opened. I actually do think we're just gonna move around the sentences around. Is when he hires the new help, which is more like a bodyguard because he believes someone is coming in and stealing the objects, and so he believes he needs extra protection, which is why he hires someone who works as a mage. Chapter 4, because it is the big moment, it is the part of the story that we have very much already previously outlined. It came to me very quickly, so let's go through it real fast. We learn the MC does for fun. We have opening day. After opening day is when he hires a mage for protection, indicating that he has money to spend, that he believes there is a thief on hand, which is very super good because it adds an extra layer to the story that we can also start to deep dive into. And it starts to build what we believe will be MC's outside main story outside the relationship. All great things. The chapter ends with him in his shop, so there's other stuff that happens. We just don't know what it is. However, opening day, learning what's for fun, hiring a mage for protection. We can do a whole fun scene of comedy where he sees several mages and he falls onto the mage. There's a lot of different ways to go about this, so this actually might be the only scenes that we see in this chapter. But the big green guy with wings comes running in. Like I said, I have decided he will have wings. He watches him from afar. Before greeting him, he realizes who he is and starts getting cold, like standoffish. The love interest, however, is very warm and inviting, and he asks what he wants and he describes what he needs. Then they talk payment. The love interest says he doesn't have gold to give. The MC says he can work it off around the shop and then asks him out for a drink, for a catch up, because even though he is standoffish, he likes some answers based on the abandonment issues that did develop afterwards. The love interest reveals he was just here for a stop while hunting, and that he'll have to be again leaving very soon. But when he's back, he'll help. And that is what we learned from chapter 4, which is the reaction. Now, it doesn't really line up super well with what hers is. Chapter 5, however, will run into... This is basically about as far as I have, by the way. Maybe chapter 6 as well. Possibly, depending. I do not have block 3 at all planned. I also don't know plot twists and all those fun things will be inherently important to this story when you see stuff like that. But that being said, when it comes to chapter 5, I have an idea. So let me quickly run with it and then we'll see what comes back. All right, let's go run through chapter 5 real fast. So a few days later, struck by, he's in thought, this love interest showing up again. And he starts asking around. They travel with him through the town. With nothing comes up, he takes his horse to the town next to theirs. He does this a few times. Traveling pretty far out, which becomes important in later sections. Before finally, possibly sooner than later, I don't know yet. I have a percolating thought. Before finally he gets a bit of answers, before having to stay in an inn because it's late at night and he knows not to travel at night due to the monsters that do live inside this world. And then he travels home with the new information to a shop with another missing object, and the guard says she didn't have any indication of how this object went missing. And I'm sure, once again, this is pretty vague when it comes to things. I'm sure we'll break it down as we get closer to chapter 5 and I have a better understanding of the structure of the novel based on scenes and non-scene count. So right now, this is what this looks like. All good and dandy. Okay, chapter 6 says consequence here. He took action. What is the consequence of this action? Which, now that I'm thinking about it, I maybe did jump a little bit. Maybe the consequence of his action of leaving town for a period of time is that the shop got broken back into. I'm trying to figure out the pacing for the relationship, and if 2 chapters in between each time is too signatory, being like, oh, he's going to abandon him again, or if he should show up at the end of chapter 6. And we just have that like individual chapter in between. Yeah, I don't know if there's enough time in between chapter 5 and chapter 6 for him to be able to go do whatever this job is and come back. Maybe we'll have chapter 6 be a chapter that moves through time. And that way by the end of chapter 6, it makes sense because time has progressed. Let me write it through and we'll see what the good old noggin decides. Okay, moving on to chapter 6 is that he travels home with new information to a shop that's missing an object. The guard says she didn't have an indication of how it went missing over the course of the month, as I feel like a month is a long enough time. He keeps a stronger eye on things around him. We learn a little bit more of the objects that are in the shop and how he is finding these objects as well, which I think is super important. At the end of the chapter, the love interest shows back up with gold to pay off the object that he did take. They talk it out, and he agrees to work for him, especially because he doesn't have another job lined up. And they agree he can stay in his house as well, so he can keep his gold on hand when needed in case another situation pops up. Now, with pressure, plot, twist, and push, we are going to put a little action in here, which I think is really fun, but we're also going to keep it nice and cute. Also, I'm trying to keep the action low stakes. Plot twists, I think, is where consequences from earlier ideas got in the way. Actually, because we'll do this, we'll move block 3 down. But when we come up here, we have learned that all this information is taken care of, and we have currently learned that this information is also taken care of. Now, the reason why I took this section down was because a trades bundler. MC learns about monsters and love interest learns about the items, as both are super important, but we're also going to teach a little bit of fighting and stuff in here, things that are cute. I've learned that cutesy, cozy normally means flowers, encyclopedias, footnotes. I also have learned that it means cooking. A lot of people think cozy is like baking and cooking, but we could do some of that. But also like the cozy fantasies I've read, once again, are pretty low stakes. That being said, the pressure chapter, I don't really have a lot of ideas. So I do think block 3 will be the least amount of words that we've written so far throughout these. They could be quick sentences. So bear with me as I work my way through Chapter 7. Alright, for Chapter 7, this is the first 2 weeks of living and working together. We learn more information about love interest life and probably some more of the MC as well. They are tending to the shop, his garden, and they cook dinner together. They both sleep in his bed as friends. I was thinking of some cute moments of getting ready for bed together and then catching eyes and like being very cute about it. We also see a festival in this chapter as well. There are a few festivals, a few parties that are thrown in this village to come to either remembrance and or during solstices and those type of things. One of those things is going to be going on during this chapter as well, which means that we get to see them at a festival. Everything feels pretty good at this point in the story as well. The main character is starting to wonder, because he hasn't left yet, it's always in the back of their head, is he ever going to leave? So that's also being floating around in this chapter and over this next section. Let's jump into Chapter 8. Okay, Chapter 8, we're seeing some of those consequences, some of those actions that were taken earlier in the story. This takes place a week later. They are working in the shop when it's attacked by bandits. Several items are destroyed, and both the love interest and the guard take them down as the MC huddles in the corner. We learn that they were both killed. They were there to kill both the MC and LI due to him chatting about him. And we learn more information on the love interest. Why would someone be after him? Those are the questions that we're learning answers to. The chapter ends with the MC agreeing to train a bit. Chapter 9, all I know is that there will be a slight training sequence. However, other than that, there is nothing. So, and I'm thinking that this can be like a lot of like, oh, we're touching, once again, we're keeping it very, very light on everything due to the build-up and what we're building up to as we get further into the second act of the story. So a lot of those big moments that you guys might be excited for probably won't happen in the sections that you get to read, which I think is really fun for you guys to be able to get to experience them. Now that this is written and we have chapters broken up, that's technically the end of this video. I do typically like an individual document where the whole outline sits. And this, my friends, is a very simple way of looking at a chapter outline. This is how, for right now, the book itself will be outlined. So we have Act 1, which is broken up into 3 different blocks and into several different chapters as well. I don't have a current structural plan for amount of words per chapter, but I will figure that out. When we start writing, I might have it more broke down. I'm not 100% sure. So like I said before we jump off here, we'll be writing Act 1 together on live streams. Those live streams should be, I actually don't know, but they should be listed hopefully in advance, but they're really just going to be on times that I can physically write. So late at night, early in the morning. I work a weird schedule, so I can only do it at weird times. I'm very sorry for that. And then, because I do want to keep the story itself private between you and I and those individual readers, I am going to unlist those videos because I do feel like certain people are going to want to be able to watch them or see the story as they're being built or whatever the answer might be. We can figure out a way to be able to get those accessible to anybody who does miss them. However, you will have to get in contact with me with me directly, which I would probably recommend through like Instagram or through Twitter, through like my Sims Twitter or something or those lines. You guys can also comment on one of these videos saying I like to, write with you. I see that those lives have been taken down, or I'll probably put them all in the same playlist and you can see that, 6 videos are unlisted. Can I have access to those 6 videos type of thing? I don't know yet. We'll see how it goes. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll talk to you guys all next time. And have a beautiful rest of the day.